Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Jacob and Jacob podcast. If it's your first time tuning in, thank you so much for joining us. I'm your host, Jacob Pear, and joined by me today is my co-host, Jacob Orbaum, who I just want to congratulate on winning his first lacrosse championship with school today. MVP of the game, in my opinion, starting defenseman. Congrats to my man, Earl. But for our special guest today, we have NFL Network's fantasy guy, Adam Rank. Adam, thank you so much for coming on today.
Oh my gosh, what an honor to be on when Jacob earned the MVP award in his lacrosse game. That's amazing. Look at you. Was it you? Which one of you was it?
It was him, but I gave him the MVP award.
You gave him. Well, listen, that's good enough for me. If Jacob gives Jacob the MVP award, like I'm in, like it's cool. And by the way, I'm super stoked that I look relatable to you guys wearing a hoodie. That's the one thing I want to make
nice and casual.
I'm trying to come off like the you guys don't even know who Steve Buscemi is, but he's the guy in the meme holding the skateboard with his hat on backwards, and he's like, "What's up, fellow young people?" That's what I feel like right now. But I'm very honored to be on with you guys.
Yeah. So, Adam, as we can see behind you, you're a big Bears fan. So, can you tell us earliest memory of being a Bears fan?
Oh my gosh. It's just something that you grew up with. And truth be told, I grew up, my family, I was born in Chicago. I grew up in Southern California, and I'm old enough to remember when the Rams were here. So I sort of like the Rams, and then they moved. And what happens to a lot of kids out here in Southern California is you either root for, the Patriots or whoever your parents like. And I had a connection to Chicago, so it was easy for me just to transition to being a Bears fan. And it's like, I know because like my dad talked about it so much that I know everything. Like I lived through everything. Like when I was a kid, gosh, I had to be your guys' age. And my dad used to take me to bars just to go see. This was back before like Sunday Ticket was like a huge thing. And we would go, he would just like get me in. Like I looked like one of my friends, I just showed because my niece pulled out a photo of me when I was 15. And when I was about the age of 12, I looked like I was 22. And then from the age of 12 to about 31, I looked the exact same. So when I was 31, I looked like I was 22. I just always looked that age. So my dad would tell me, if you're with your dad, like nobody's gonna bother you. And it's not like he was feeding me beers. I was just sitting there drinking Diet Pepsis and watching the Bears, eating nachos. Like it was a fun experience. My mom was like, "Where are you taking him?" He's like, "Don't worry." It's a pizza place. They did serve pizza. He wasn't lying, but it was a tavern. It was a legit tavern. That was like such a fun year. I think the Bears made the playoffs that year too. It was like the 90s. So yeah, it was fun. Like it was really cool. And it was really fun just to have these experiences. And, like as I grew up into an adult, allegedly, I learned how to, how you behave in a bar just from being in those interactions, just cause like, I just had to keep my mouth shut and do whatever. And it was something that I like to do. Like who doesn't want to sit there and watch football? Because you guys will take it for granted now because you can go to Buffalo Wild Wings and just do whatever. Like, that's just what your life is like. Back in the day, it used to be more scandalous, and you used to have to be snuck. Is that sneaked? But I don't know what the proper word is. But in any event, you had to be, through nefarious means, had to be taken into a bar to watch these games. So those were so much fun. Like it was cool. And this place too, if the Bears won, they would play Chicago by Frank Sinatra, who's an old guy you've never heard of, but he was very famous. My parents loved him, and he had a very famous song about Chicago. And if the Bears won, they just cranked it up. It was so much fun. It was really cool.
Yeah, so the past few years, your Bears have had some trouble with the quarterback position with Mitch and a guy that
Wait, are you guys Eagles fans?
Yes, of course.
Oh, stop it. How long are you going to go before you want to bring up the double doink? Because you're being polite now. You should have led with that. I'm a little upset.
It wasn't in our questions, but now that you brought it up, what was your reaction to that game?
It was one of those things where you could just feel it unfolding. And it was bad too, because, Mitch had Allen Robinson wide open and missed him. And then the defense, and I know the defense gave up a huge drive that, it was like, hey, well, why didn't the defense stop him? I'm like, when the defense has to play perfect every week, where you just can't have, like, there's no wiggle room. Like, it's so difficult to play football that way. But Mitch actually did hit Allen Robinson on the same play to set up Cody Parkey's field goal attempt. And I thought Doug Peterson, I'm like, oh, he's friends with Nagy. He won't do the freeze. And when Parkey missed it, my wife started freaking out, and I'm like, they called time. Stop, sit down, please. They called timeout. Like, I'm just like, I know he's going to come back and miss this. So please don't. And then he hits I don't know if you can remember watching it in real time, if you're old enough to remember, it almost looks like it ricochets in. So there is like a deceptive camera angle, and it's so disappointing, because they would have smoked the Rams. They would have had a better than average chance against the Saints. And really, when you look at that season, the Bears played Miami in Miami when Brock Osweiler was like an emergency start. And I remember doing a fantasy show, and everybody's like, oh my God, like, start the Bears defense. I'm like, bro, this never works out this way. Every time something like this happens and the fantasy community is going to get involved, and all the gamblers are going to be like, we're betting Chicago. Like, it's just not going to work out. It just never does. And that game came down to an opportunity for Cody Parkey to win it, and he did not win it. And because they dropped that game, they ended up being the 3 seed, because had they won that game, they would have been the number 2 seed. They would have had the tiebreaker over the Rams because they beat them. And then the double doink might have never happened, or else it just would have happened in the quarterfinals. But in any event, it was disappointing. But what are we talking about now? Quarterbacks? Are we talking about Justin Fields?
You already know what I was going to ask.
I'm a big Justin Fields guy.
I'm not a Justin Fields guy. So what's your take on Justin Fields now that you're
not a Justin Fields guy?
He's the biggest Justin Fields hater you'll ever meet.
Justin Fields guy.
Why? Why are you hating him?
I mean,
I love him.
I mean, in that championship game, I get he played Alabama, but he really didn't impress me. In that Big Ten championship against Northwestern, he also didn't impress me. I mean, I get it. He destroyed Clemson, but who does Clemson really have on their defense?
Clemson was loaded. That was an amazing team. He went out there. I don't know. Every time he got an opportunity to go up against Trevor Lawrence, he outshined them. And I will even say that Ohio State team was not good. I thought that team was all Justin Fields, and it's amazing. So I know how it goes too. And everybody points out, like, what about Ohio State quarterbacks? Which is the interesting thing to me is, obviously you could point to Texas Tech. Like, well, who had Texas Tech ever produced before Patrick Mahomes became, one of the best quarterbacks in the game? And people will be like, well, it's not like they've, had a history of quarterbacks. And I'm like, Ohio State actually doesn't have a history of quarterbacks. Like, Dwayne Haskins was the second player drafted in the first round, an Ohio State quarterback drafted in the first round since 1980 something, 82. So before you guys were born. So it's been Dwayne Haskins. And just to be like, well, Justin Fields isn't going to be good because Dwayne Haskins and some dude who was drafted in 1982 weren't good. That's just, I don't understand that. I think that what they've ended up with Justin Fields, and by the way, he's a Georgia guy as well. So he did play football at Georgia, although not outside of Matthew Stafford. They haven't really lit it up either. But I love that he's a natural leader. He's a good player. He excelled on the college level. We don't have to go into this situation trying to make ourselves feel better about this pick, because with Mitch Trubisky, to me, it's a lot like what was going on with Trey Lance, where you're like, oh, he's tall, he's athletic, he's got a strong arm, hasn't played a lot of football. You're like, yeah, that's exactly what they told me about Mitch. And it did not work out well. And I love Kyle Shanahan, and I hope it does work out for them. But like, that kind of stuff scares me. Zach Wilson playing like I was making jokes about how he was. I know that BYU's not in the Mountain West anymore, but I'm like, oh, they're out there dominating Mountain West competition. Then I went and looked at BYU's schedule. That was the garbagest, like even by BYU standards, that was a garbage schedule. And I don't want to knock other people to make myself feel better about my guy. But I think with Justin Fields, and I will say this about Mac Jones as well, is I know that there's stigma about those schools putting quarterbacks into the NFL, but I really do believe both of those guys are going to be very good NFL players. I would have been happy with either one of them. I know when they traded up, I would have been actually really upset if they would have been going for Mac Jones, just because I'm like, oh, well, the Patriots could have gotten, but if I had to pick between the two, I wanted Justin Fields. I think he's a good player. And I think he shows a lot of poise. I think he's a leader. And I think it's something that's been lacking. Just, like having a guy who is who's like when he's an all-star high school recruit, he's got like such a great pedigree about him. Unlike Mitch, who was 1 year at North Carolina, and I can't even remember the scrub. Like if you go to North Carolina and you're not starting every year, like what is wrong? Like that's not a football school. No disrespect to Bucky Brooks or any other Tar Heels, but that's not a football school. And so I don't know. I'm excited and I'm going to enjoy this moment. And I know that it could end up backfiring on me. Like every time that DC makes a movie, I'm like, this is going to be the one, like Justice League's going to rule everybody. And then it sucks and I have to sit there and wear it. But in the moment, I'm enjoying it right now.
What are your thoughts on the Bears like tweeting Andy Dalton QB1? Like, do you think Dalton should start, or do you think Fields will end up getting it?
You know what? I love what they did because, and I really wish I could credit the guy on Twitter who wrote this, who I'm about to steal this from, but they were talking about the Bears situation. And a lot of times to get your quarterback of the future, to get your Justin Fields type player, you've got to basically be 2-14 now or whatever. I don't even know. 2-15, whatever. That 17th game is always going to throw me off now. But like you have to be really, really bad, have a fire sale, and go through like a total rebuild. The Bears are going through a rebuild right now, but are also going to be very competitive, which is fun to see. The only guy that you really miss is going to be Kyle Fuller. Like that was kind of a disappointment that we had to get rid of him. But I think that the team's competitive, hopefully, looking over, I don't have the schedule, but looking over the opponents, it looks like, they have an opportunity to be 9-8 again, or 10-7. God, it's so weird thinking about it in that way. But I think they could be a competitive team. And I think that Andy Dalton, because Matt Nagy was a member of the Chiefs staff when Patrick Mahomes was a rookie, and what they did with him, obviously, is they had Alex Smith start. Patrick Mahomes sat for 1 year, and then he became the starter, and then became an MVP. The Bears could do that, but I think that they could also go a number. I think it also, to me though, it also reminds me of what Deshaun Watson did with Houston, where they wanted to bring him along slowly, and then he was great during his first couple of games with Houston before he blew out his knee. So I could see that happening as well. So I'm going to let the coaching staff figure out what they're going to do with that. Andy Dalton's a very capable quarterback. I think that, I think that we were disappointed because we were in the Russell Wilson conversation. Mm-hmm. Like that was one of the things that was so difficult. And I'll be honest, like if you ever looked at my Instagram feed or whatever, it was obnoxious. I was all in on Russell Wilson. That was fun. Like, it's just, he mentioned us. Like we were brought into this. It wasn't like, I never thought we would have a realistic expectation. It's like, let's say like if Gal Gadot came out and said, listen, I'm not going to divorce my husband, but if I do, if she listed 4 guys she would go out with, and one of them was me, like I would tell my wife that she's got to move out. Like, I'm sorry, you're moving out. Got to do what you got. Like, listen, no disrespect, but it's Gal Gadot. Like, I'm going to do whatever. And then to have to settle for Andy Dalton, you're like, oh, like, ooh. Like, it's not bad. Like, he's not bad. But it's also, but it's like, that's not what you were expecting. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, for sure. And
It's like if somebody like you guys know, like you guys probably have like, do you guys like Philly cheesesteaks?
Yeah,
Am I being stereotypical? Of course, right? But you know that there's one place that's like really good, like there's a whatever. And then but if somebody brings you like, somebody's like, hey, I'm bringing over chili cheesesteaks. Philly cheesesteaks. What are chili cheesesteaks? Let's make that. That sounds like a dinner. But somebody's like, I'm bringing over Philly cheesesteaks, and you're like, sick. And you're like, oh wait, it's from Sbarro. You're like, not the same. So that's what Andy Dalton's Sbarro pizza. Sbarro, whatever.
All right, let's move on from this.
Wait, hold on. Do you kids like the show The Office?
I love The Office.
I knew it.
I'm not a fan, but it is.
Yeah.
It's hilarious. I love when high school kids are into The Office. One of my neighbors, my niece, she loves The Office, and she's your age. And I'm like, how do you like this? Like, obviously you're watching it in syndication for the Peacock Network or whatever. I love that you love that, Jacob.
Thank you. I mean, are you a big Michael Scott guy? I could tell.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love that show.
I love Steve. He's so talented, Steve Carell. I mean, he does comedy and he's also in serious stuff, which I think is unbelievable about him. He's one of the top guys in Hollywood, in my opinion.
And he's musical as well. Like, it's just so, like, he's almost annoying. He's too good at everything. Like, okay,
he is
dial it back a bit.
Yeah, but let's move on to your career. So, how did you end up? How did you end up in the fantasy football industry?
Well, the longest story possible that I can give you. No, you know what? I was an intern. You know, when I was in college, I was the first member of my immediate family to ever graduate college. Now I have nieces going to college or graduating too. So for me, it was like, for my parents, it was like a big deal. I wanted to go into stand-up. And so they're like, can you just go to college? Can like one of these kids, like I have two older sisters, like, can one of you do it? And I said, all right. And I went to Cal State Fullerton. I even tried out for the baseball team. And let me tell you, that didn't go well. It's one thing, like when you're a high school baseball player, you're thinking, oh, I'm pretty good. And then you go to that next level. And of course, Cal State Fullerton at the time was an elite level school. And you're like, oh yeah, I'm not as good as these guys. Okay. Sorry guys. Sorry to have wasted your time. I will see you later. But one of my friend's moms, who was an educator, because I was kind of struggling in school. I didn't like college. And she suggested that I look into journalism. She's like, oh, you're a good writer. Why don't you major in journalism? You could be a sports writer or something like that. I'm like, I had no idea you could do that. I'm like, really? Like, I go to college and I can study to be the guy who's writing columns or doing whatever. And she's like, yeah. So I took that up. And then I got an internship with the NFL, which was amazing. Like the luckiest thing you could ever do. So I worked for NFL Publishing. And I did it for 3 summers. And then after the 3rd summer, I normally, the previous 2 times, I would have like a big send off. Like they would go get Tito's Tacos, or we'd get burgers from the Shack, and they'd give me some swag. I'd get like a denim NFL t-shirt, or a denim button-up shirt with an NFL logo and a watch. I got none of that stuff on the 3rd one. They didn't even ask for my key card. Mostly because my supervisor, a man by the name of Chuck Garrity, was gone. Like he had left for vacation that day. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So that weekend, on that Sunday, to be specific, I was at a tavern in Newport Beach. I was of age, by the way. I was 22. No. If I was at Cassidy's, I would have been of age. So I know the places that I snuck into when I was younger. But so I was of age, and I was sitting there. And I just looked at my friend and I said, you know what? I'm going to show up tomorrow to the NFL and see what happens. Like worst case scenario, they're like, hey, we thought you were gone. You're like, oh my God, I didn't know. Chuck didn't tell me. Like, what are we going to do? But I showed up, got there early. My key card was still working. I'm like, all right. So I'm just in my office. My computer login's working. You're like, all right, sick. Like I'm sitting here. This is going to be pretty cool. And then just did it. And for a couple of weeks, I was, just showing up every day, punching the clock, doing what I got to do. And a lot of my job was walking around, like asking me, hey, you need help? You need help with something? I was like an editorial assistant. I just helped out everybody. Walked into this guy's office. His name, Brian Peterson. And I go, hey, do you have anything for me? And he's like, oh, yeah. He's like, as a matter of fact, he goes, I need somebody to look up. We're doing a card set for Ron Mix and Upper Deck, and we're doing this card set. I need somebody to go look up quotes from NFL Hall of Famers. And I'm like, yeah, I'm your guy. I'll do that. So I started working on that. And then when Chuck Garrity returned on the Monday, 2 weeks later, he walks up to my office and he goes, what are you doing here? And I'm like, oh, well, Peterson's got me working on this trading card set where I'm researching quotes. And I've got like a stack of books on my desk. So it looks official. And he just sits there and he shrugs. He's like, all right. He just walked away. I'm like, okay, cool. So, and I had a job to bill my hours too. Like this was super cool. And then a couple months later, so I'm trying to remember, because he would always make jokes about like, you're the longest running intern of all time. You're the George Blanda of intern. No, Cal Ripken of interns. And so one time he just shows up in my office and he goes, you know what? He's like, you can't intern forever. And I'm like, oh, here it goes. Well, it was a fun ride. What are you going to do? But he actually just had a little yellow Post-it note, but yay big. And he goes, we're just going to hire you. Like, here's what you're making. It's like $11 an hour or something ridiculous. And here you go. Like, here's your ID number and all that. I'm like, that's it. Like, I'm just hired now. And then I never went away. I just, made myself as valuable as possible, doing whatever, coffee runs, working on trading card sets. If we can fast forward a little bit to make a long story even longer. I know you didn't ask, I'm going to tell you anyways, but fantasy, if we fast forward all the way to 2007-ish, I got a chance to work. I was in our NFL.com editorial department and I got a chance. I wanted to write a little bit more. And our boss at the time, the fantasy department was one person. And so our boss was like, look, if you will edit all the fantasy content and take care of that, then you can also write. And I said, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do that. And so I did that. And then in addition to that, then we started doing these on-demand videos. This is like 2009. Were you guys born? What? Oh my God.
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
But 2009, we started doing on-demand videos. And again, there was just one guy in the fantasy department. And so the video team was like, hey, you do stand-up. You want to jump in on these? And I'm like, of course, like who doesn't? So I just started doing it. And then that turned into, Fantasy Live, which was a Sunday morning only show. And it was Fabs. Michelle Beisner was the host. Dave Damashek was on it. And then that became a weekly show. And then here we are in 2021 and Fantasy Live is going. Matthew Berry's out there. Matthew Berry's obviously the GOAT. Like he's out there crushing it, like still dominating. Like Matthew Berry is in Avengers movies. Like it's so awesome. Oh my God. So that guy's crushing it. And then Brad Evans started his own network. And then you see like Harmon's killing it. James Coe's doing a lot of stuff. And you see like all these great sites and everybody like just producing just some of the best content, like not only just like from a fantasy sense, but I would say some of the best football content out there, because us fantasy dorks have to know everything, at least offensively. If you're like, oh God, who's the dude starting opposite Marshawn Lattimore? I might not remember that one off the top of my head. I know they drafted the kid from Stanford who's going to end up starting. But the thing is, it's been great to see, how the industry is just kind of blown up over the last decade, and to be a part of that to me is very special. So I owe it all to just not leaving, just to sitting there and getting a wild hair to be like, you know what, I'm going to show up tomorrow and see what happens. And here we are right now.
Have you ever done a stand-up bit about your career and about staying in NFL? I feel like that would be.
People hate it. I do kind of like, if I have to listen, if I'm headlining and I'm doing like 45 minutes, I might break out that story. But I do talk about some of the stuff that goes on with the NFL. I think a lot of it too. What's funny is you notice more and more like how much like just everybody's into fantasy. And if you go out, like there'll be times where I'll go to the Brea Improv or Irvine Improv or something like that. And the amount of people who want to come up after the show, like the headliners get up, like, because afterwards all the comics are hanging out and then the headliner gets swarmed. And then there's always a lot of people around me. Normally just to ask like, hey, am I starting Stephon Diggs this? Well, not Diggs. That's a terrible example, but you know what I'm saying? Like people want to ask fantasy questions, even the comics. Like I walk into the green room and they're like, hey, and it's so funny because they don't want to, because they're trying to, they know they're trying to be cool. And then it just takes one. And I'll usually like be friends with at least one comic who's on the bill or something. And they'll happen to be, hey, so by the way, so are we starting, Justin Herbert over Aaron Rodgers? And I'm like, yeah, of course. And then everybody's ears perk up like, hey, okay, so like, can I show? I'm like, get out your phone. Let's do this now. I'm going to prepare for the show. So I always go early so I can sit there and be like, okay, well, I'll get your fantasy questions answered out of the way. And then I'm going to prepare for the show and then we'll go out there. But yeah, I do need to break this out. I do need to make it. I need to punch it up, as they say in the business, and bring that out to the stage.
Yeah, that's a very unique story. And I feel like if I saw that in a stand-up comedy bit, something that I feel like a lot of.
How did you feel about it right now? Was it enjoyable to you? Was I boring you?
It was very
well told. It was funny. It was everything you needed in a comedy stand-up bit.
Well, thank you so much. I had practice because yesterday, because I've got two children, a 5-year-old and a 2-year-old.
Nice.
And I like to take my kids to school. So I now hang out with all the other like moms. And so one of them yesterday, I actually did do it. Like these two women were like, how did you get like, do you mind? And I gave them that whole story. So I was practicing. So that was a rehearsed story because I told it yesterday. But no, it's cool. And I got people seem entertained by it. So Jacob, I will take your advice and take that on the road next year.
There we go. Don't forget about us when you take it on the road.
I'm gonna absolve any knowledge of this conversation and be like, I thought of this all on my own. I needed prodding.
So moving on, let's talk some fantasy football for next season. Aaron Rodgers, as a Bears fan, of course, you know him very well. Some uncertainty about his future in Green Bay. If he ends up somewhere else, not Green Bay next season, how does that impact Devontae Adams? And would you still select Devontae Adams in the first round? And also depends who the quarterback would be in Green Bay.
Yeah, it's difficult because I know one of the teams that he's talking about is the Las Vegas Raiders. Like he keeps throwing them out, which by the way, like, can you not be more, stop being disrespectful to Derek Carr. They don't need a quarterback. But if it was one of those things, like let's say Derek Carr got traded to the Packers as part of the deal, like that would change. I think Devontae Adams would still be a very good fantasy wide receiver. I think he's going to be fine. I don't think that he's going to be first round fine. This is one of the things last year is the first pass catcher I was taking off the board was Travis Kelce. Mm-hmm. And then after that, I was getting Devontae Adams in the second and was very pleased with myself. I made some other terrible picks like Miles Sanders and things like that. Kenyon Drake, bought into that. So I understand it's not perfect. It's not an exact science, but I really do like, I still think Devontae Adams will be good. And I think people will panic on it. And I think people will not want to take him, be like, oh, I'm not touching him. It'll be weird to see him tumble down the board a bit. And I think that it'll be interesting to see what happens with him and what happens with Michael Thomas, because so many people are upset with Michael Thomas and they'll remember what happened last year. And now Drew Brees isn't there, but he had 2 pretty good games with Taysom Hill as the quarterback. He didn't catch a touchdown till the playoffs. I do know that, but I still believe that given an opportunity, Michael Thomas will end up being good again. So I think that, those are 2 receivers I think are going to slide a little bit, but I think will end up being tremendous values for you. And I hope Aaron Rodgers does leave. I think it's serious. Yeah, like Russell Wilson playing, like there's no doubt about it. But like Aaron Rodgers, like he seems like the kind of guy, like, I don't know it just seems like, I know that it sounds like a lot of money that he would miss out on if he doesn't play. I would do the Jalen Ramsey if I was him. I would show up and then be like, my hamstring hurts. I think that sounds like a jerk move, But like Jalen Ramsey did it correct. Like he never got fined because he just said my back hurts. Hey, Aaron Rodgers shows up, my back hurts. He will look like it'll be suspicious, but at the same time, like you're not getting fined and you're sending them out, and then you put the team in a worse situation. At least if you're holding out, the coaches and everybody can be like, hey, Aaron's not here. Let's rally around Jordan and let's go out. But if Aaron's there being like, my back hurts, although I think the players would know what's up, but that's what I would do. And I encourage it as a Bears fan. It's like Freaky Friday. We got Justin Fields. Your team's falling apart. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to look like in week 18, but I think for right now, it looks pretty fun.
Now I got a question for you about Aaron Rodgers. And this is a question that someone asked me, and I thought it was a really good question. Is there a better chance he's hosting Jeopardy full-time next year, or is the quarterback of the Green Bay Packers?
I don't think he was that good at Jeopardy. Oh, yeah. What a jerk I am.
He was rated. What?
He was fine. He was fine for an NFL player.
I agree.
Like he's like, is it like, oh, it was fun. Like to see Aaron Rodgers out there. And this is no knock on him, but jobs like that seem so easy. Like I can host Jeopardy. Like you probably can't. Like I hate to break it to you. Like even the people who are like, I could do your job. And I'm like, in a way, yes. But I'm like, it takes a long time to get comfortable in front of a camera. And I thought Aaron Rodgers did very well, given his training. Aaron Rodgers was the equivalent of a 5th round pick getting an opportunity to go out there and play in a blowout. And you're like, oh, he did good. Like he didn't embarrass himself. Good for him. But I think that when you put somebody out there, I don't know if LeVar Burton has done his turn yet. Like he's going to be amazing. I think if you put somebody like Wayne Brady out there, our guy we were just talking about, like if we did, what is Michael Scott's real for Steve Carell? Geez, Steve Carell would crush that. Like you could really go to Hollywood or go to accomplished hosts. Because even Anderson Cooper, who has hosted game shows and everything, like he hosted the TV all the time. Like he wasn't that great. Like people thought that he bombed, but I'm like, no, because your expectation for him was bigger because he's on TV all the time. And your expectation for Rodgers was lower because he'd never done this kind of stuff before, but it's not bad. It's kind of like when you see, when Blake Griffin does comedy, I'm actually very impressed by him because I think like he has some decent like comedy chops because when he does those roasts, I'm like, gosh, that's kind of good. Cause you've seen some of those go horribly wrong. I think of The Situation when he did his, it was so bad. It's like, see, like this isn't as easy. Even when somebody's writing the jokes for you, it's not as easy. And I would like to see, I'm surprised Peyton Manning didn't get a chance to do that. Is he going to do it? I don't know, but, yeah. And I don't like Peyton Manning either. So him and Rodgers, I will never give the benefit of the doubt, but.
You got it. All good.
We appreciate you coming on today, but before we
we got 4 minutes. Well, hold on. We got 4 minutes. I want to go to the buzzer.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
I can see the clock winding down.
No, we still have a question.
Let's get all the time.
All right. I was going to ask favorite Office episode.
Oh my gosh. I just taped one the other day. Obviously, every time I always like going to the last episode. I love Casino Night.
Yeah, it's a great one.
I think that's a great one. I think the episode with when Holly finds Michael at the top of the building. And
when he's about to jump off.
He's not going to jump off.
Yeah,
he's just up there contemplating life. I think that's a real sweet episode. And the one that preceding it, when she's not engaged and he's in his office and he's like celebrating and he's recorded the video of like, all right, you go crazy. And he's doing everything. I think that's really good. Dinner Party is also really good.
That's my favorite.
What about you? Dinner Party is your favorite one?
Dinner Party. I mean, sexual harassment's hilarious in the second.
That's a great one.
I mean, all the Dundies are awesome. I mean, an underrated episode, I will say, is the one where Will Ferrell is D'Angelo and he goes in the full body cast trying to dunk the basketball. I thought that was hilarious. That's an underrated one.
I like the Robert California one where he has the party at his house.
Yes.
Like that's kind of a strange one too, but it's like, oh, it's like really, like it's really funny. And I was watching the Threat Level Midnight episode
Oh, the movie.
And
That one's awesome too.
when they were doing it, and I made a joke to somebody. I said, Daryl's a good actor. And they're like, oh, like Craig Robinson. I'm like, no, like not Craig Robinson as Daryl, but in the context of the Office universe, Daryl acting in the Threat Level Midnight movie is good. Because when Michael's doing the coin flip scene, like Daryl's really good. Like, oh, like his acting, that character's act. I don't know how to explain it, but it's too meta. I think I'm trying to get too into the weeds with this.
No,
It's
I
like
get what you're
Daryl's
saying.
a great actor.
Yeah, Daryl in the movie was a good actor. Yeah, you
Yeah.
don't worry.
Yeah, because like some of them were not good. Like they're purposely doing bad.
Yeah,
And then
like
they do the
him.
scarn.
Yeah.
Like the girl who oh my gosh, who plays Karen Fittipaldi. Like she's a bad actress.
Rashida Jones.
Rashida Jones is a bad actress in the Threat Level Midnight movie. Because the way she reads her line, like, hey, baby, have you ever, like the whole thing? I'm not going to repeat the line because it feels inappropriate. But less than a minute though.
Well,
I'm sad now.
Well, we appreciate.
Let's do this again sometime.
Yeah.
Hey, absolutely.
Absolutely. Right. Well, right before the season, let's do it again.
Okay.
All right,
guys. Yeah. Hey, keep doing your thing, man. I'm proud of you guys. I'm glad you shot your shot, reached out to me. So this was fun. And anytime that we can do this again, I'd be more than happy to do it.
Thank you
Hey,
again.
we appreciate it. We really appreciate it.